Shalom and welcome to all of us who are students of Torah. Welcome, welcome. But it's impossible to go forward at this moment with a discussion of our text, which is, by the way, Ki Tavo, Deuteronomy 26, verse 1 and following, without a brief comment on this week's national elections in Israel. To my personal distress, Israel allows for no absentee balloting except for those diplomats scattered across the world and for certain select representatives of the Jewish agency. So I had no voice in the outcome, whatever it is that outcome will be. Like so many others, I had my villains and I had my good guys. I had dreaded outcomes, dreamy outcomes, and oh well, better than nothing outcomes. But none of that matters anymore. The voters have spoken, and once we have figured out what they actually said, everything will become clear. The process will take several weeks at least. You have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, October 2nd. The Attorney General, Mendelblit, is supposed to decide whether or not to present an indictment against Bibi Netanyahu. No one has a clue, therefore, as to when Israel's new government will formally take shape. But here are a few takeaways that might leave us feeling pretty good. It is not wrong to feel pretty good. Number one, the Arab voter turnout was 60%. The joint Arab list garnered the third largest party votes in the Knesset. There are even scenarios, no matter how remote, that might make the joint list, the Arab list, the official opposition party in the Israeli parliamentary system. That deserves a big wow. A splendid token of the fact that Israeli democracy, though in some ways bent and injured, is still very much alive and well. Two, the Jewish voter turnout was about, Jewish Israeli voter turnout was about 69%, a bit higher than it was 5 months ago. The voters were engaged, they cared, and they participated. Second big wow. Predictions before the balloting began predicted, there they stated, pointed to a drop in the voting. But those predictions were predictably wrong. And third, everyone expected that defense issues would once again be the dominant concern of the voters. Threats of increased hostilities against Iranian forces in Syria, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon were constantly invoked by some candidates. But this time, there was also a serious focus on ending religious coercion in Israel, on assuring the religious and political and financial rights of Reform and conservative Jews in Israel, on taking control of conversion away from the ultra-Orthodox, and of guaranteeing that Haredi young men would serve alongside of their non-Haredi peers within the Israeli army, the IDF. This is an astonishing turnabout. And it seems that Avigdor Lieberman will be earning high praise for this broadening of focus if it holds up in the negotiations. Will everything change when all the political horse trading has been concluded? I don't know. Nobody knows. Too soon to tell. Bibi doesn't know. Gantz doesn't know. But I choose to celebrate what has been achieved so far. Moving on. Consequences. Consequences. That's what this Sedra is all about. The chapters here are filled mainly with curses. If you do this, then that will happen. Worship an idol, you'll be cursed. Dishonor your parents, you'll be cursed. Commit sexual offenses, right, you'll be cursed. Consequences. What kind of consequences will befall the transgressors? Vile diseases, loss of home and of fields, destruction of their family, expulsion from the land. This is a good one. Madness, blindness, and dismay. Starvation, a terror that will consume us from within. Do you remember Oscar Wilde's portrait of Dorian Gray? A young man, incredibly handsome, makes a deal regarding a portrait that has been painted of him. Dorian Gray would live a life of total sensuality. He would do whatever it was that he chose to do, not bad. And his flesh would show no consequences. That portrait hanging far away from sight would increasingly reflect all of the pain that Dorian Gray causes, all of the diseases that he has acquired, all of the lust that has driven his choices, and all of the cruelty that has given him so much pleasure. That was a good deal. Just like the deal. Remember who else? Faust, right. Do whatever you want and you will be none the worse for wear. Trust me. Until, of course, Dorian Gray finally gazed at the portrait, saw the ugly, diseased figure of what once a handsome and carefree young man he was, and was forced to confront the truth. There are indeed consequences for the choices we make. His soul, Dorian's soul, had rotted away. So had his body. To be fair, our Sedra does have a lovely little passage that promises all kinds of good things to those who lead noteworthy lives. Blessed will you be in your home. Blessed will you be in your field. Baruch atah bavoacha, Baruch atah b'tzeitecha. You'll be blessed in your coming. You'll be blessed in your going. Terrific. But mostly our Sedra focuses on the dramatically serious consequences that await us if we fall short of God's demands. Rabbi Shai Held, who is president of Machon Hadar, great place in New York City, ponders the fascinating way in which we translate the Hebrew word YIRA, Yud Resh Aleph He. Sometimes that word is translated as fear, but other times it is translated as awe. But how do we know which way to translate Yirat Shamayim? We are told to have Yirat Shamayim, fear of God, awe of God. Are Jewish ethics meant to be based upon an almost mystical sense of God's supreme creative glory, or upon a dread fear of God's capacity to inflict pain upon us? Held notes that Rabbi Joseph Albo taught that when the soul beholds someone who is very great, very exalted, very high, then the soul cannot imagine that from such a being, pain and retribution might flow. So awe, Albo, awe, as the dynamic behind our behavior is much better than fear. The highest form of human behavior is lishma behavior. We do good, lishma, for its own sake. We do good because it's good, not because we're trying to evade punishment, and not because we're trying to get some goodies. Lishma, we do what's right because it's right, even as we stand in awe before the creator of the universe. But then why does our Sedra even exist? Albo, a philosophical ethicist, drills deep into human nature. He says, there are base elements within us that impel us toward behavior that is utterly unacceptable to man, to God, to people, to God. There are spiritual elements within us that draw us to seek to emulate divine virtues. It is hard, it is extraordinarily difficult to push back against our baser drives, our baser inclinations. Yira starts off meaning fear. Yira's fear exists to impel us away from evil choices. But as we learn to reach higher and higher, Yira moves away from being fear and becomes awe. We see the ideal, we sense the ideal, we yearn for the ideal, and so there is no need for a long litany of blessings to attract our behavior. curses to teach us what Dorian Gray had to learn, that there are consequences to the choices we make. That's why the curses are there. And blessings, little points of light that make our journey toward a nobler life just a little bit easier. To do good, not out of fear, but out of a sense of appreciation that we live but a brief span in a small corner of a vast and complex cosmos. To do good, because doing good is a magnificent way to gaze heavenwards and to say, thank you. Tonight, Saturday night, Jews around the world will observe Slichot, the penitential prayers that herald the high holy day season. So I'll have a chance next week as well, but now I say to you, Shana Tova Ki Tavo. May you be written in the book of life for a very good year. Have a sweet and wonderful New Year. See you next week. Shabbat Shalom.